Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Justin Trudeau announces that he's stepping down as both Prime Minister and Liberal leader. We hear from the PM and have reaction. Police in Lethbridge continue to investigate a homicide that occurred last month at a motel on Mayor Magrath. And new government information shows that 57,000 Albertans are receiving financial support from the province, which is the highest number in almost 6 years. We have more of the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is resigning as Prime Minister and Liberal leader. Speaking outside of his home in Ottawa, Trudeau says he asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament until March 24th and that she agreed. Trudeau says he will step down once a Liberal leadership contest takes place and a new leader is chosen.
I advised the Governor General that we need a new session of Parliament. She has granted this request, and the House will now be prorogued until March 24th. Over the holidays, I've also had a chance to reflect and have had long talks with my family about our future. Throughout the course of my career, any success I have personally achieved has been because of their support and with their encouragement. So last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
Trudeau's announcement comes 3 weeks after Chrystia Freeland resigned as Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, leading for calls for the Prime Minister to step down. Now, in a YouTube post, federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says the Liberals are trying to trick voters by swapping in another Liberal leader in an effort to rip off Canadians for another 4 years.
They want to protect their pensions and paycheck by sweeping their hated leader under the rug months before an election to trick you and then do it all over again. Now, while leaderless Liberals focus on saving their jobs and fighting each other for power, the country spirals out of control, an out-of-control housing emergency, an out-of-control migrant crisis, an out-of-control $62 billion deficit, not to mention tariff threats from the United States. Oh, and another NDP Liberal carbon tax hike kicks in this April 1st. Everything's out of control, and now the government is out of control. This cannot go on.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says it will not matter who the next Liberal leader will be since the party has consistently let down Canadians.
They do not deserve another chance. They're more interested in themselves than the struggles of Canadians. We've got serious threats of Donald Trump and tariffs that put in question hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs. And instead of focusing on you and protecting your jobs, they're worried about themselves. And we have another serious threat to the middle class in Canada, and that is Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives want to cut from the middle class to give to their rich CEO friends.
Brian Lilly is a political columnist with the Toronto Sun and joins us now from a holiday trip in Palm Springs, California, to chat about the Trudeau resignation announcement. Brian, nice to be away from all of the snow. Were you surprised by Trudeau's announcement that, like his father, he's taking that long walk in the snow?
It was actually snowing. The lawns in the streets of Ottawa had a nice dusting overnight, so I guess that comparison is appropriate. By the time it happened, no. I'd long said that I thought that Justin Trudeau wanted to stick around, fight Pierre Poilievre in the next election, that there was no way he was stepping down. But there'd been so many signals over the past several days, including a memo that went out telling all staff in the PMO, you got to be in office in person tomorrow, big day. The different machinations happening in the background. We kind of knew something was coming. Was he going to prorogue and resign? Was he just going to prorogue and try and stick around? Instead, it's a bit of both. He's announced that he will resign, but not until they pick a new Liberal leader. So he's staying on as PM and as leader of the Liberal Party until they pick a new leader. Will that be before the House comes back from prorogation on March 24th? I think it has to be. Others are disputing, but we don't have the rules of this new Liberal leadership laid out yet.
Brian, Trudeau has asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament, as we talked about. What does that mean exactly, to prorogue Parliament?
It means that you shut down the current session and you are going to come back with a new session. Now, you can prorogue for a period of time. You can announce that you're proroguing and come back with a new session that same day. That has happened, at least at the provincial level, that has happened. And sometimes governments just want to reset their agenda. In this case, Trudeau's obviously looking to avoid a non-confidence vote.
So who are some of the top contenders you believe will be vying for the Liberal leadership?
Well, we already know that Chrystia Freeland, the former finance minister who kind of kickstarted all of this off with a resignation in mid-December, has been calling around to Liberal MPs, gauging their support. She's long been considered a contender. I mean, I don't get the appeal, but there are a lot of people around her who think that she has the royal jelly. Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada governor, Bank of England governor, guy with the World Economic Forum and Goldman Sachs and all kinds of things that will make conservatives pull their hair out. He's obviously a contender and has also been calling around to Liberal MPs. Christy Clark is an interesting one, though. The former Premier of British Columbia is clearly throwing her hat in the ring on this. She definitely wants to run to be the next Liberal leader. She would be interesting because she, is more of a centrist Liberal than Justin Trudeau. She is out campaigning already against Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and she's clearly angling for this as well. So it would be the first time the Liberal Party would be run by a woman.
Thanks so much for your time today, Brian. Enjoy the warm temperatures. That was Sun columnist Brian Lilly joining us from sunny Palm Springs, California. Well, today, if you look on the calendar, it says Epiphany. It's a day Christians around the globe celebrate when the Star of Bethlehem led the three wise men or kings to baby Jesus. Jeanette Roche is now with an early peek at our forecast here. Happy New Year, Jeanette. Now, here in southern Alberta, we have a lot of cloud cover. Any chance that we may see some stars tonight?
Happy New Year, Hal. Good to have you back. As far as this evening goes, we could still see a few clouds up above there, along with a wind chill of -18. But as we get into Tuesday, mainly sunny skies, also a drastic jump in temperature as well. Away from these chilly temperatures, we're going to be seeing that high of 0. And then after that, the temperatures should just keep on rising into the pluses. I'll be back later in the show with a look at that 7-day forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. At least 3 people were killed and 8 others were wounded in a shooting on a bus carrying Israelis in the occupied West Bank on Monday. The dead have been identified as 2 women in their 70s and a 35-year-old police officer. The driver of the bus was seriously wounded. Israeli military officials say at least 2 Palestinian gunmen carried out the attack and that security forces who were pursuing them set up roadblocks and were going through several towns in the area. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk, says the U.S. government continues to push for a ceasefire in Gaza before Joe Biden leaves in a couple of weeks' time. A Hamas official says 34 more hostages will be released under a truce with Israel.
You've seen the list. It's heartbreaking. There's children, there are women, young men. And the clincher here is that they don't even guarantee that those individuals that are listed in the list are going to be delivered alive. So these might be bodies. They might be, it's horrific that we're still here over a year into this, that there are civilian hostages that are children, that are babies, that are young women.
Foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will also offer up her thoughts on if we will see a number of wars finally come to an end once Trump assumes the White House on January 20th. Watch for that full interview coming up in the second half of our program. Lethbridge police continue to investigate a homicide that occurred in late December at a motel on Mayor Magrath Drive. Police responded to a suspicious death on December 28th at the Super Lodge, where they found the body of a 34-year-old woman in one of the rooms. It was determined that on December 26th, 3 suspects who were known to the woman killed her with a firearm. An arrest warrant was issued for one suspect, who's 23-year-old Melissa Christelle Tidland. Police say she turned herself in on Friday and is now in custody. Police also obtained search warrants and arrested 2 other people in connection with the death. They are 28-year-old Drew Austin Waters and 36-year-old Kyle Douglas Doddridge. All 3 are charged with first-degree murder and arson of property. Waters is also being charged with possession of a prohibited weapon. Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services are recommending residents be mindful of the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning during the cold winter months. Chief Fire Marshal Troy Hicks shares vital tips on how to keep yourself safe from the silent killer.
Carbon monoxide, actually how it's created is it's fuels not being burned completely. So it could be anything from natural gas to gasoline to wood, things like that. If it's not working, the devices are not working completely, the fuel is not burned completely, and that's what causes the carbon monoxide. Eliminating a lot of the things that will cause carbon monoxide, which for example could be maybe faulty equipment, so it's a good idea to get people to come in and test your equipment annually just to make sure everything's working well, like your gas fireplace, your gas furnace, stoves, anything like that. You want to make sure that you're not running vehicles too close to air intakes or inside your garage. Don't use things like propane heaters. Do not use your oven or your stove to heat your home. That's not what it's created for, and that will cause an awful lot of carbon monoxide in your home.
Hicks adds that the best safety action to take is to invest in carbon monoxide detectors. He also says to go outside immediately if you notice symptoms of poisoning, such as lightheadedness, blurred vision, and an upset stomach. Also to call 911 right away. Many Canadians are taking advantage of the GST holiday, which continues until the middle of February. For some business owners, however, it's been nothing but a pain. BCN's Naveen Day explains.
The GST holiday was anything but a holiday for many Canadians, particularly small business owners and their employees. The exemption, which only applies to certain items, has created hassle and confusion for underprepared stores and their customers. Secondhand stores and pawn shops had a particularly complicated feat to accomplish.
It was a day and a half to have one of my employees redo our whole computer program to adjust the items, and just particular items that had GST included over the next couple months here. And so, yeah, that alone was quite a burden.
Some restaurants hoped the GST break would increase foot traffic and sales. So they were disappointed when that did not happen. Adding more insult to injury, the lower dining bills brought in lower gratuities.
Our server tips is depend of the amount of the people bill, total bill. So that's how it goes in here. With the total bill, that's the percentage of amount that the tips can get for the server.
There was also confusion over what items were tax exempt.
Video game systems, for example, they were GST exempt, paddles exempt, the games exempt, other accessories not exempt. So which accessories are not exempt? Well, we have to kind of look that up and figure it out. And it was really confusing to the customers and to us.
And there's mixed feelings regarding the political motivation behind this initiative.
As a business, we don't really have a political opinion on things, but we are fans of having the government leave us alone and let us run our business, and we're good at that. We know what we're doing and let them stay out of our hair.
Instead of freezing it 5% GST on a restaurant, why don't give it more, focus more on other things than the restaurant itself, like a housing, more of buying more important things than eating out in the restaurant.
But it wasn't all gloom and doom for the hospitality industry. They were still busy over the holidays, and the benefits of the tax holiday could soon be realized. In an email to Bridge City News, the executive director of the Alberta Hospitality Association wrote, "The test will be to see if there is a change in consumer spending in January and February, which are typically much slower times." The GST holiday began on December the 14th and runs until February 15th. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
A new year often means New Year's resolutions. It's an opportunity for a fresh start for many of us and implementing healthier habits into our lives. BCN's Heidi Echevarria spoke with a nutrition expert about healthier eating habits for 2025.
Exercising, sleeping better, improving mental health and spiritual life, quitting smoking, and saving money are some of the resolutions that people often set for themselves at the start of a new year. In the area of nutrition, experts say that the keto, no sugar, low-carb diet is the plan for eating healthy, and that for many years it has been at the forefront of those who practice healthy diets. Added to this are the habits that also brings benefit to other areas. Chris Robinson, nutritional consultant and co-owner of Purple Carrot, explains what are the main aspects that people are looking for?
I think a lot of people are focusing on their brain health. We have a lot of people focusing on their hormone health. And so we'll see what trends come with that. And I always welcome trends that involve health, so long as we're doing them well. I mean, you can eat meat-based poorly or really well. You can eat plant-based poorly or really well. You can eat keto really well or really poorly. And so there's always healthy ways to do things. And that's where it's always nice when people come in to ask us questions, because we're always happy to help give them advice, as opposed to reading something on the internet and that may or may not be true or good for you or what have you. People want to make changes for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just that, well, I need to make a resolution, and sometimes it's because they have a specific issue going on. Oftentimes we eat poorly around the holidays, and so people are like, oh, I feel terrible after Christmas, and so I need to make a change. Anytime we're looking at our health, looking at our choices we make, and know we have things that we can do in our day-to-day life that can make us feel better, that's really cool. Lots of veggies, protein regularly throughout the day, and drink lots of water are my big do's.
The recommendation given by the nutrition expert Robinson is to start with really small changes, like adding more water and vegetables and putting less sugar, so that the diet resolution lasts through the whole year. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Team USA beat Team Finland 4-3 in overtime to win the World Junior Hockey Championships for the second year in a row. Finland, which had won 5 in a row going into Sunday's game, received their silver medals. Meanwhile, for the bronze medal match, Czechia beat Sweden 3-2 in a 14-round shootout to win its second consecutive bronze medal. Sadly, Canada finished out of the medals, finishing 5th in the prestigious tournament, celebrating some of the best young hockey players in the world. Now, speaking of hockey, the Hershey Bears of the American Hockey League set a new world record for their annual teddy bear toss on Sunday. After scoring their first goal in a matchup versus the Providence Bruins, fans were quick to toss a sea of stuffed animals onto the ice, and what officials say is the largest number ever recorded at 102,343 stuffed animals. That's around 10 stuffed bears for every fan in attendance. The Hershey Bears, located in Pennsylvania, are renowned for their large number of bears thrown onto the ice during their annual teddy bear toss game, a tradition in hockey found across North America, especially in the Western Hockey League. The Lethbridge Hurricanes held their annual teddy bear toss game last month, which saw over 4,200 bears tossed on the ice, donated to charity. Love those teddy bears. Also love some of the sunshine we had earlier today, but still quite cool. Will things be warming up anytime soon? Have a look at the weather pictures on deck. You know, it was kind of a slippery commute on the way to work today. We've had our fair share of snow and ice as the new year began. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we've also experienced some pretty chilly temperatures. Any chance that we may see and feel another southern Alberta chinook anytime soon?
Well, as far as temperatures go, it sure does look like it, Hal, because we are seeing the last of the frigid temperature days as we are headed into the opposite direction there. We're going to start to see that thermometer climb up to 0 on Tuesday, and then we're going to get into the pluses after that. Wednesday, we could even see some showers, up to 3 degrees, back to 0 on Thursday with the mainly clear and sunny skies. Friday, also seeing some showers, but look at that, nice there, high 5 degrees, high of 3 on Saturday and 1 degree on Sunday. So not a bad week shaping up after all for this pretty much first week of 2025. Average high for this time of year, -2, average low, -14. You'll see that those are actually going down in temperature now. The high on this day was back in 1914. That was the record high. It was 12 degrees, and -41 was the record low, and that happened on this day back in 1909 in Lethbridge. Sunrose this morning. Here you're going to see a difference as well. Sunrose this morning at 8:28, sunset 4:47. Looking at 8 hours, 19 minutes of daylight. So we're now going in the opposite direction. You're going to start to see the days getting longer. Okay, so a pair of 6s there on the west coast tomorrow. Victoria, mainly overcast skies with fog patches dissipating in the morning. Vancouver was under a fog advisory earlier today. Now tomorrow morning, more fog patches, but that should be dissipating by noon, and then mix of sun and cloud. High of 3 degrees tomorrow in Edmonton with mainly clear skies. Mainly sunny skies also expected in Calgary tomorrow with that high of 6 degrees. degrees. As we see the rest of the prairies, we're seeing lots of mostly sunshine, but frigid weather, not so much in the temperatures, but in the wind chill. So wind chills looking at the minus 30s, minus mid 30s to high 30s, very cold, but minus 10 for the daytime high in Saskatoon with mainly sunny skies, minus 14 in Regina, and a daytime high of minus 18 in Winnipeg with clear skies. Of course, that is without that crazy wind chill. Okay, we're going to see some flurries in the central part of the country, minus 4 for the high in Toronto and 40% chance of flurries. Same thing in Ottawa, 40% chance of flurries, minus 8 there, minus 6 in Montreal with a few periods of snow beginning around noon there. We're going to be seeing flurries beginning in the morning in Fredericton, high of minus 3. Halifax, 60% chance of flurries, minus 2 there. Minus 2 expected in Charlottetown with some snow there as well, and some drizzle, actually 60% chance of drizzle happening in St. John's tomorrow with a high of 2 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
New government information shows that more than 57,000 Albertans are receiving financial support from the province. That's the highest number since 2019. Alberta says Ottawa's rollout of the emergency response benefit during the first year of the pandemic meant provincial income support recipients dropped substantially in 2020 and 2021. The number, however, started to pick up after that, growing by about 20% last year. University of Calgary economics professor Ron Kneebone says the increase could be a sign that Albertans are gradually returning to the provincial program after receiving federal support during the pandemic. He says it's also a sign of tougher economic times. The Alberta government announced details of a formal working agreement with Enbridge Pipelines to increase oil and gas production. Premier Daniel Smith says this will help increase production to the United States, which already receives more than 4.3 million barrels of Canadian oil per day. She also discussed her concerns regarding the 25% tariff threat from incoming U.S. President Donald Trump.
The U.S. president seems intent on putting tariffs in place. And so we're in a position now where we've got a lame duck leader with no immediate plans to leave, with no resolution to who is going to be the bargaining partner until, I think it was suggested, as late as May. So I believe it's up to myself, the other premiers, to make the case to the Americans ourselves in the absence of federal leadership. And so that's why I'm going to the inauguration. I'll be staying there for 4 or 5 days. I hope to be able to put forward the case that I made today about how we are the Americans' best friend and trading partner. We can provide the resources that they need to be successful.
Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down today 73 basis points to 24,999. The Dow was also down 25 points to 42,706. The S&P 500 was up 32 points to 5,975, and the Nasdaq was also up 243 points to 19,864. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 40 cents to 73.56 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to 3.71 US. Gold was up 13.44 to 26.36 1 cent US an ounce, and silver was up 47 cents to 29.94 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.44 per bushel, barley is at $6.66, canola is at $14.19, and corn is at $8.10 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was up $1.15 to $195.20. Feeder cattle were down $1.15 to $260.53, and lean hogs February contract was up 28 cents to 81.03. And the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours and sits at 69.80 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is resigning as Prime Minister and Liberal leader. Speaking outside of his home in Ottawa, Trudeau says he asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament until March 24th and that she agreed. Trudeau says he will step down once a Liberal leadership contest takes place and a new leader is chosen. So how will the Trudeau resignation really impact our trade relationship with the United States? U.S. political correspondent Lisa Daftari joins us shortly from Los Angeles to offer up her thoughts. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. As you've heard on Bridge City News, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that he'll be stepping down as both Prime Minister and Liberal leader. So how will that really impact our relationship with the United States moving forward? Lisa Daftari has a few thoughts. She's the host of the Foreign Desk and a U.S. political correspondent who joins us now from Los Angeles. Happy New Year, Lisa.
Happy New Year to you.
So Lisa, let me ask you, first of all, what has the reaction been like in the United States with the incoming Trump administration? And what have you heard so far with Trudeau announcing that he's resigning?
You know, I've seen some really funny headlines and comments on social media. You know, Trump liberating the 51st state, Trump liberating Canada, the gift that keeps on giving, which is Trump, who hasn't even entered the White House yet, affecting obviously foreign policy to such a great extent. We would love to think that this is credit that is given to the United States, obviously, more of it being a domestic issue for Trudeau. But I will say this, and Hal, you and I talk about this a lot, which is, you know, go woke, go broke. I think this is definitely another nod to a leader who went too far to the left, affected the daily life of Canadians, divided the country to an extent that it was, you know, just nothing that could be repaired. His own party turning against him. I think it's time for him to move on and really come back to the center. It's something that we saw very similar things happening in the United States with a referendum on a lot of the leaders who really drove Americans apart during the pandemic, saying very crazy things about, you know, Americans who chose not to be vaccinated, Americans who were, you know, just different opinions on masking, on questioning the pandemic, on questioning vaccines. Just, you know, we saw a lot of that around the world. So we're seeing this referendum of the, you know, coming more to the center from the left, even going further to the right. We're seeing that a lot in Europe, and here we go in Canada as well. So, you know, it's not surprising that, you know, that he would step down and not wait for him, you know, for his ship to sink, so to speak. So I think that this is something that he saw coming. But the timing of it, 2 weeks before Trump's inauguration, obviously being a very curious in terms of timing. But I do think this was a long time coming as well.
Let's talk about that inauguration. You're right, coming up on January the 20th. Do you think it'll be fairly smooth? Will there be some issues? What are your thoughts?
I think at this point, going into this months before, even right after Trump was elected, I think a lot of people predicted that it wouldn't be smooth, that he wouldn't be certified, that it wouldn't, you know, all these things. But I think now Americans are moving towards the center, and we just said that about the Canadians as well. I think we're hopefully entering a very a common sense era, hopefully wanting people to work together. And I hope that Democrats are watching and seeing the reaction around the world, not just in our own country, to Trump's reelection, and thinking, you know what? Maybe there are better days ahead for the United States. Maybe we can rally around this candidate in order to be safe, in order to secure our border north and south, in order to have a better economy, in order for us to thrive. I mean, you know, this is, we've led from behind for so long. We've seen 4 years of America just tanking on the current policies. So why not give it another chance? And I think there are many common sense Democrats who don't want to go far to the left. They don't believe that AOC is the future of the party. And in order to reclaim their party, I do think they will stand behind Donald Trump in order to move forward, to create a bipartisanship that is fair and American, not anti-American. And hopefully we will elect out those candidates who are making it very difficult for this country to unite.
Lisa, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is calling for a Gaza ceasefire before Joe Biden leaves office. An official with Hamas says they have 34 more hostages ready to be released under a truce with Israel.
Yeah, Hal, if you've seen the list, it's heartbreaking. There's children, there's women, young men. And the clincher here is that they don't even guarantee that those individuals that are listed in the list are going to be delivered alive. So these might be bodies. They might be, you know, it's horrific that we're still here over a year into this, that there are civilian hostages that are children, that are babies, that are young women that are being held. A video was recently released by the terror organization, and the family of the young woman agreed to show it, Leary, and that went viral to show this young vibrant woman and what she has become, obviously in terrorist captivity over the last year. The fact that the Biden administration wants to get something on the books before they leave office is not a surprise. Look, this is something that they have kind of teetered for the last year and change, to try to get some sort of ceasefire, but at the same time, kind of kowtowing to the terror organization, kowtowing to Iran's regime, which is sponsoring these terror organizations and not really getting the job done. Juxtapose that with Trump, who hasn't even entered office yet and is already saying, you better release the hostages or else. I mean, we don't know what that or else is. We don't know how he will handle this, but the tone, just setting that tone, it's deterrence. And that's exactly what's necessary to deal with terror organizations and the Islamic Republic that has truly played this administration for the last 4 years. So we shall see if they do get some sort of ceasefire. But what we have seen in the, again, more than 1 year that has passed is that Hamas doesn't feel like there's any urgency to agree to any sort of ceasefire. And even when they do, they break that ceasefire almost immediately. And we're seeing that with Hezbollah. They use it as time to rearm and just go at it again. So will this be a meaningful ceasefire? I highly doubt it. But again, the Biden administration very urgently trying to push this through before the end of their term.
So Lisa, with Trump moving back into the White House in a couple of weeks' time, will we see more heavy sanctions against Iran, the Islamic Republic, in order to curtail some of these proxy wars so they're not funding Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah?
Right, and that's exactly the way it looks. Look, under the first Trump administration, we saw what we call the pressure campaign, which was a very highly focused and targeted campaign to place these economic punitive measures in the form of sanctions and other things on the Iran regime in order to cause what they called behavioral changes. They weren't pushing for regime change. They weren't trying to invoke any other sort of political change or war or military yet. Now, what's interesting is in the last year or so, the Iran regime is the one who introduced military action on the world stage, saying, it's an option because we will fire from Iran soil. Therefore, now it brings back all the options on the table, military options, hitting their nuclear sites, going after their nuclear portfolio, obviously, which has marched forward, the centrifuges spinning, and obviously not playing along with the IAEA, even when they were under a deal, shutting off surveillance cameras, not letting the inspectors in. We know that their nuclear portfolio has progressed. So when Trump does come into the White House, I think at the very minimum, they will start with the pressure campaign in order to, again, try to maybe twist the arm of the Iran regime a bit into stopping the support of these terror organizations. They're sending, operatives into the United States. I know there are operatives on Canadian soil. We know that they are operating within Europe, within Central America, within Latin America. I mean, they have to be stopped. So at the very least, we do believe that there will be legislative changes in order to bring about some behavioral changes, but further than that, I think Trump is very smart to say all options are on the table.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is vowing to capture the, quote, despicable murders behind a terror attack in the West Bank that left 3 Israeli dead, including a police officer. Now, Lisa, the attack also left 8 other people injured. The Israeli military has launched a manhunt for the 2 suspected shooters affiliated with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist group.
Yeah, another group sponsored by the Islamic Republic, the regime in Iran. Not surprising. They're cowards, right? Going after a bus, going after, old women, which we saw in an attack last week. Here you have 2 sisters-in-laws and an off-duty police officer who obviously had committed his life and dedicated it to, keeping people safe, and to lose his life so tragically while he's off-duty in this way. There are 2 or 3 others, I believe, that are in critical condition, and others who are injured. Another day in the Holy Land. It's horrific to think that this is the way people have to live. This is the way children are being raised, to go into bomb shelters because indiscriminately they are attacking. And it will continue. Look, if this war will end and another one will sprout up. When will we see an end to this lifestyle, this change in really shutting down Hamas and Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all the rest of them, is to shut down the root of the problem, which is the Islamic Republic, which is sponsoring all of these groups, training them, giving them arms. imagine what kind of money and resources and how desperate these people have to be for the Islamic Republic to approach them, or these groups to approach them and say, blow yourself up, or go on a shooting spree when you know you will lose your life in the name of jihad. And that's exactly why Donald Trump in his first administration did shut down UNRWA, and he called it the pay to slay program. He said, we know that they're paying the families of these terrorists, and we're not going to fund it. It's not, U.S. taxpayer money is not going to go for this endeavor. And that's exactly, this whole thing has to be shut down. The whole process has to be shut down. Palestinians, if you are for Palestinians and want a better life for them, this has to be shut down. Their children deserve better. They should not be raised to be jihadists. They should be raised to be accountants and doctors and engineers. And this is not the way to do it.
Donald Trump says he and China's leader Xi Jinping have been speaking through representatives, Lisa. Trump accused China of ripping off the United States economically and wants things to change once he moves back to the White House. But will they?
We hope so. Look, the fact that he's saying that he has already started communications, perhaps, look, even before Donald Trump decided to run for president the first time around. I remember watching him on the New York news channels and the morning shows, and he would go on rants about how China's ripping us off. And that's the reason why we need a better leadership. And I think that's one of the reasons he actually ran for office, is to stop people from ripping us off. He sees himself as a CEO of a company, being the United States, that is being ripped off, and he wanted to fix that, or to even the scale. Will it work? Who knows? China's not exactly the most fair and even-keeled bartering partner here, but we shall see. Look, China's in this for China, and the United States, under the leadership of Donald Trump, hopefully will be in it for the United States. So the fact that the two are communicating, I think we want the same things, right? We want prosperity. We want to, and the fact that they want to march into Taiwan, I think Donald Trump hopefully will address that as well. China is one of our biggest problems, and I think going into the future, it's going to continue to be a problem. So we shall see how Donald Trump will approach this problem.
What about Trump's influence when it comes to the war in Ukraine between Zelensky and Putin? Will we finally see peace?
Hopefully. I think Zelensky said this morning in a quote that was quite profound for Zelensky. He said, I think Donald Trump will be the one to end this war because countries of the world fear him. To that we say, duh. In comparison to what we've had for the last 4 years, obviously, he's referring to Donald Trump really approaching this with deterrence, putting a stop to it. It's endless. Obviously, I don't see Donald Trump writing out these big checks to Ukraine in the sense that he wouldn't want this to continue. He wouldn't want this war to drag out and senselessly continue. And hopefully we will see an end to all wars in the next 4 years. I mean, look, it comes back to that idea of working together and coming to the center. I think left, right, center, whether you're in Canada or the United States, you want an end to wars, you want an end to terrorism, you want an end to unsafe borders that are bringing in people who ram their cars into crowds of people and are capable of other things that are found on the FBI's most wanted lists. So, we just want an end to all of this, and we want to be safe and we want to be prosperous. So with that in mind, I think a lot of people are hoping and rooting for Donald Trump, even though they either didn't vote for him or they didn't want him to win. I think a lot of people are now coming around to wanting his success in the next 4 years.
Before Joe Biden leaves office, he's been handing out presidential medals of freedom, including one to Hillary Clinton and Democratic donor George Soros, who's a billionaire. Lisa, what are these medals all about?
A lot of backlash from giving out these awards. Look, many people do this, right? Before leaving office, they pardon a lot of criminals, which Joe Biden has done. And they give the medals of honor, which it's an honor, right? It's coming from the White House. It's a presidential honor. Hillary Clinton, perhaps understandable. A lot of people are questioning her moves in terms of what happened in Libya under her watch. A lot, Americans killed in the line of fire. That didn't have to happen. Now, the more questionable one being George Soros, someone who has given billions of dollars, dedicated his funds and his energy and his power to really the undoing of America and its security, giving money to NGOs that have worked towards protests and looting, and really the anti-American, pro-jihadists, pro-Iran regime, pro-fascist. I mean, just the list goes on and on. Has worked to put DAs in place. For example, here in Los Angeles, Gascon was one of his picks. DAs who are, just against a lot of the punitive measures that keep cities safe, a lot of the defund the police movements, or funded by his organizations. So huge question mark. We're scratching our heads here thinking, how could this be American? Why did Biden do this? And I'm sure it has more to do with the influences around him than himself, not to let him off the hook. But I think this was a very questionable move to give an individual like Soros and his ilk, his foundation, his son, those who will follow in his footsteps and carry on his foundation, because he is 94 years old. It does really question how anti-American he is and how anti-American it was to give him an award on the presidential stage.
U.S. political correspondent and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks again for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, the Christmas season is done and wrapped up, and so has 2024. So how did we do economically in Southern Alberta, and what are things looking like going into 2025? Well, joining me to discuss all of this is Trevor Lewington, who is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Trevor, Happy New Year. Good to have you with us again.
Happy New Year. Great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Of course. So I'm guessing you don't have a lot of numbers in yet from the Christmas season, but what have you heard from local businesses? Was it an average season for them, or below or above average?
Yeah, you're right in that we don't have any of the official numbers just yet. Statistics Canada and other sources take a little bit more time to put that all together. But just talking to a number of local retail businesses, they told me it was their best Christmas season ever. So that was very encouraging to hear, particularly in retail. I'm thinking maybe lower interest rates perhaps loosened people's wallets a little bit. On the flip side, I did hear from a few restaurants that they had seen lower volumes. So I'm interested to understand from the official numbers why that bit of a discrepancy, if that's true. December's a really critical month for retail businesses. Most businesses, December is that make or break month. So hopefully everyone did well, and that trend continues.
Yeah, I would imagine the GST break has made some sort of a difference. So what kind of feedback are you getting from local businesses on the federal government's GST break?
Yeah, from a business perspective, that was a very complex set of rules, to try and figure out what products were in, what products were exempted, which wasn't. There was a lot of cost for local business to reprogram points of sale systems, manage inventory, train staff, and really only 2 weeks from when it was announced, essentially, to when it went into effect. So for a lot of businesses, it was a lot of stress for not a lot of impact. And the federal government's estimates were that a family spending about $2,000 in those 2 months on goods that actually qualify would save around $100. So, from my perspective, more of a political gimmick than something that's going to drive a lot of economic activity, and unfortunately put a lot of the burden on the business community. But we'll see if consumer spending actually took advantage of that. It was complex to even understand what was exempt and what wasn't. So I think, I don't know if most consumers even changed their behavior as a result, but we'll see.
Right. It kind of sounded almost like it was a gong show. And some of it didn't really make a lot of sense, but yeah, interesting. On another note, is there some apprehension among business owners regarding the threats of the 25% tariffs from Donald Trump?
Yeah, this is an interesting time. We have obviously instability after this week's announcement of the Prime Minister stepping down and triggering a leadership race with the federal Liberals. 90% of Alberta's exports go to the United States. We are heavily dependent on trade with the US, and Lethbridge is no exception to that. So there's a significant risk to the local business community, whether it's manufacturers or agricultural commodities. We rely very heavily on exports that are potentially at risk. And so, We've seen the Canadian dollar, for example, decline significantly in the last month or so as traders price in that risk. Makes everything we export more challenging in the sense that it's a better deal for our American buyers. They're getting a significant discount. That could be good. But all of our manufacturers and companies that are buying supplies from the U.S. are paying significantly more. So obviously, there's lots more to unfold. I think there's the risk is that we get into a trade war back and forth with tit for tat kind of tariffs and penalties and other things, and that would be very bad for everybody, U.S. consumers as well.
Wow. What's the overall economic trend right now for right here in Southern Alberta?
Overall, Southern Alberta, I think, is in pretty good shape. Housing starts were up significantly, for example. They almost tripled in 2024 versus 2023. Most of that in multifamily, like apartments and duplexes. So good to see that massive turnaround in housing starts. That also has, a good implication for the housing crisis that we're seeing nationally in terms of rent costs and other things. Real estate prices, if you're a seller, if you've got a home to sell, real estate prices were up about 15% last year. So that's good news. Not so much if you're looking to buy, of course. And employment was relatively strong. We're seeing lower unemployment rates than the rest of the province and outperforming the rest of the country.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then,
Go ahead, Trevor.
and then, there's obviously risk ahead, but most economic forecasts expected Alberta to have about 2.5% economic growth in 2024, outpacing the rest of the country. And, ignoring what's currently on the docket, the original forecast for next year is that we'd see about 2.8%. So most forecasters expected 2025 to be stronger than 2020 performance, and Alberta to actually outperform the rest of the country. So there's reasons to be optimistic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry for jumping in on there.
No
I got a little bit, piqued my interest when you were mentioning employment. So what are our unemployment levels at this point? Are we seeing some layoffs after the Christmas rush?
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that gets excited about unemployment data. I mean,
Not
everybody
excited,
should be just as
but
excited.
it piqued my interest there.
So the unemployment rate locally increased actually to 5.7% in November. So that's up a little bit from the previous month. And it's actually a fair bit higher than the same time a year ago. So last November, we were sitting at 4.3. So feels like we've seen a bit of a change in the unemployment rate. However, when you look at Edmonton and Calgary, for example, that are way north of 7%, our 5.7 is pretty good. And it is seasonal, so we do expect some changes as retail season slows down, as weather impacts construction. But we're just about to get back into spring, I hope, very soon, and the agricultural industry picks up. And so, again, we're performing relatively well compared to the rest of the province.
Okay. What about small businesses? Are we seeing a decrease or an increase in business startups?
Yeah, great question. I think the important thing for people to remember in Lethbridge, 95% of our businesses are actually considered small. So when we talk about that, government speak is that if you have 49 employees or less, you're a small business. And in Lethbridge, 95% of our businesses are small. So, we always see new businesses starting. We see some businesses that sell or close. And I don't have the final numbers for the year, but we have seen a lot of activity through our office for new entrepreneurs seeking advice and assistance. We've been administering a federal government program called the Rural Entrepreneur Program for new Canadians that are looking to start a business and invest. And we've had over 100 inquiries over the last year just in that one program. So there's certainly a lot of activity in the small business space. And it's, I guess, our job as a community to try and make sure we support as many of them as we can.
Mm-hmm. Is there a challenge right now in finding workers to fill job vacancies?
Yeah, vacancies actually have come down over the last year, so that's good news. More businesses are able to find the talent they're looking for. And so when we look at the Lethbridge Medicine Hat economic region is how the government looks at this particular metric. There are about 3,500 job vacancies in our region. So said differently, that's 3,500 positions that employers here would fill today if they had someone that was qualified. And so in our region right now, Class 1 drivers, the skilled trades, and equipment operators continue to be the gaps that are most sought after.
Okay, so those would be the sectors that are kind of seeing more shortages right now.
Exactly.
Drivers. Okay, interesting. Are we seeing any changes in the real estate market now with interest rates declining?
Yeah, there has been a lot of activity in the real estate sector. It takes a little bit of time to see the impact of interest rate changes in the economy, but certainly the pace of new home builds is encouraging. There's ample supply being added to the market. We're also seeing very strong activity in the resale market with housing prices up. Population growth, there's still so much demand that I anticipate prices will certainly continue to go up. We expect the Bank of Canada probably in the first quarter here to again cut their prime rate lending rate. So that should make mortgages and loans more affordable. And, Lethbridge has the advantage of still being relatively affordable, certainly compared to the rest of Alberta and the rest of the country. And we're seeing a lot of buying activity from people outside of Alberta investing in our region. So that's encouraging. Still more growth to come.
Of course, Southern Alberta, you think of agriculture. What are you hearing from the agribusiness sector? How are things looking there?
Yeah, you're bang on. Agriculture and agribusiness are definitely the foundation of our local economy. Commodity prices are still very strong, particularly for cattle. I'm sure most of your viewers have likely noticed the price of beef when they go to the grocery store. That's not so great for us as consumers, but that's certainly far better for producers. They're able to capitalize on that. We've seen a lot of selling activity in local herds in the feed cattle industry. And thankfully, we did not see the drought that was predicted last year. It was certainly not as severe as everyone had anticipated. I think people have, certainly thought more carefully about their use of water. We've seen the government work through water sharing agreements, so we're far better prepared for next year. And as a result of those sort of lessening of drought-like conditions, commodity prices have held, and farmers had a pretty good year in terms of production. So agribusiness sector, I think, is also pretty well situated moving into next year.
Okay, great. You had mentioned earlier construction kind of slows down a little bit around this time of year, partially because of weather. So is the construction industry still continuing to be strong going into 2025?
Yeah, employment in construction has strengthened over the last year, not as strong as when it was pre-COVID in 2019. The construction sector is still smaller now than it was 4 or 5 years ago. However, we do have some major projects in the region like McCain, their expansion, the new cold facility in Coaldale. We've got new schools under construction in Lethbridge. We are seeing sort of that commercial, industrial, and institutional building going on. And housing, again, has sort of, as we've talked about, come back. So the construction sector is doing relatively well compared to last year. They've seen strength and growth, and hopefully they'll bounce back and sort of come back to their pre-COVID levels as well.
And are we seeing any positive signs of a turnaround for the Lethbridge and District Exhibition, Agri-Food Hub, and Trade Center?
Yeah, lots of conversation happening in our community about the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center. I'm sure most of your viewers will know from your broadcasts about all of the council discussions in November and December about how to fund the deficit of that facility. They're still forecasting a shortfall, an operating deficit of about $4 million into next year. The good news for taxpayers is that's being funded through existing reserves and other sources, so it won't change property tax increases. It's not an incremental, so that's a good news, I think. That $4 million deficit is still a deficit. No one wants to see that, but it is certainly better than the $6 million they were originally forecasting. So the team there has done a lot to control expenses, drive incremental business, and try and reduce the drain, if you will, on tax resources. Some of the biggest challenges, I think, ahead in 2025, other than filling the building and all of the programming, will be what to do with the old pavilions. There's been lots of discussion about repurposing them for some other use versus the cost of just demolishing them, and there's been some trade-offs. And if anyone's interested, the city is posting regular updates on it's called getinvolvedlethbridge.ca. So if viewers go to that website, they can track all of the updates and see all of the financials and all the reporting, because there's regular reporting back to council every month by the team at the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. And I think it'll continue to be a news story that we follow for the rest of 2025.
I think you're right there. What about the surrounding southern Alberta communities around Lethbridge? What are you hearing on them? Are they doing better or worse than Lethbridge?
Yeah, I mean, most of the surrounding communities continue to see very strong population growth. I think that's the advantage of our region, is that if you're looking for a slightly different lifestyle or different housing options, you have the benefits of the city surrounded by many different choices around us. As we talked about earlier, major projects like McCain and Newcold, these are very significant investments in the region that are supporting construction and other industries in those communities, as well as, the producers for the potatoes that are actually going to feed that expanded plant. And then, of course, the provincial government's investment in irrigation. So we've seen significant construction in the region in expanding irrigation capacity. So overall, what I'm hearing, certainly that population growth economically, the surrounding communities around Lethbridge are doing quite well. And no reason to see that changing into 2025.
Mm-hmm. And now that we are into the new year, what are your thoughts on where the Lethbridge economy is headed over the next 6 months, the first 6 months, I guess, of 2025?
Yeah, that's the great thing about a forecast is it's usually wrong, but we've got to start somewhere. I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, right? We know that provincially, Alberta is going to outpace the rest of the country, about 2.5% economic growth. We know there's risk from Trump and tariffs and currency. That growth target is certainly at risk, but there's lots of smart people working in government and in other institutions and other industries that will hopefully put a lot of pressure on the right decision makers. The federal Liberal leadership race and the potential for an election in the coming months does create some uncertainty. But closer to home, we know there's risks for agriculture. Certainly challenges in Europe with continued conflict in Ukraine, the Middle East. Supply chain disruptions from those wars could certainly get worse if those conflicts broaden. But here in Lethbridge, our economy is strong. We have a diverse economy. Construction is moving forward. Jobs are growing. I think we have lots to be optimistic about in 2025.
Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Trevor, and for sharing all that insight as we head into 2025. Great to have you with us, as always.
Thanks for having me once again.
Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.